Hello, hello. Mohan, Happy New Year.
Very happy New Year. And hearing your voice, not seeing you.
I don't know what I've done. It says it's working. I really don't know. Anyway, I can see you well. That's good enough.
Maybe your video is switched off, so you can switch on the video.
I switched it off, but that's about all that I know.
Now you are seen.
Well done. Very good.
Good afternoon,
how are you?
Sir. Good afternoon. Hello.
Narendra Kitya.
Yeah, I can see. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
പിന്നെയും പോയല്ലേ ജീഷ? ഡിസ്കണക്ട് ഓഡിയോ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മുടെ ഓഡിയോ ആണോ അവരുടെ ഓഡിയോ?
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, Subhadra. Okay.
അത് അജിത്ത് ഒന്ന് വന്നിട്ട് എന്റെ കണക്ഷൻ ഒന്ന് ചേഞ്ച് ചെയ്യാനുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ വരാന്നാ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു.
Sir, Avargis madam, welcome. Kekamo.
Madam muted ആണ്.
Madam, mute. Okay, sir.
Now unmuted. Okay. Welcome, ma'am.
Nice to see you, madam. Raman Menon Krishnan, Dr. Krishnan?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Raman Menons.
Okay.
Yes, Mohan sir, can we begin?
Yeah, please.
ബാക്കിയുള്ളവർ ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തോളുമായിരിക്കും, നമുക്കങ്ങ് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാം.
Yeah.
ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട VC ഡോക്ടർ മോഹൻ കുന്നുമ്മൽ സർ, PVC ഡോക്ടർ വിജയൻ സർ, ഡോക്ടർ നരേന്ദ്രനാഥ് സർ, മറ്റ് വിശിഷ്ട വ്യക്തികളെ, ആദ്യമായി സെന്റർ ഫോർ ജെറന്റോളജിക്കൽ സ്റ്റഡീസിന്റെ പുതുവത്സരാശംസകൾ. കേരള ആരോഗ്യശാസ്ത്ര സർവകലാശാലയുടെ കീഴിലുള്ള സെന്റർ ഫോർ ജെറന്റോളജിക്കൽ സ്റ്റഡീസ് വയോജന പരിപാലനത്തെ സംബന്ധിച്ചുള്ള വെബിനാറിന്റെ ഒരു പരമ്പര നടത്തുന്നതിന്റെ ഭാഗമായുള്ള ഏജിംഗ് ഗട്ട് എന്ന വിഷയത്തിലുള്ള പ്രഭാഷണം ആരംഭിക്കുകയാണ്. ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ ഏതോ ഒരു വഴിത്തിരിവിൽ വെച്ച് നമ്മൾ നശ്വരമാണ് എന്ന ഒരു തിരിച്ചറിവ് പ്രായമാകുമ്പോൾ സംഭവിക്കുന്ന സ്വാഭാവികമായും അസ്വാഭാവികമായും അനവധി പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ, ജീവിത നിലവാരത്തിൽ വന്ന അനവധി മാറ്റങ്ങൾ സമൂഹത്തിനെ തന്നെ ഒരു മുതിർന്ന ജനതയാക്കി മാറ്റിയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. അതിന്റെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട പ്രശ്നങ്ങളിൽ അവബോധം ഉണ്ടാക്കുക എന്നതാണ് ഈ വെബിനാറുകളുടെ പ്രധാന ലക്ഷ്യം. ഈ പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചെയ്യുന്നതിനായി എത്തിച്ചേർന്നിരിക്കുന്ന ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട VC ഡോക്ടർ മോഹൻ സർ അവർകളെ ഈ പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളുന്നു. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ അനുമതി കൂടാതെ ഈ പരിപാടി ഇവിടെ സാധ്യമാകുമായിരുന്നില്ല. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഈ പരിപാടിക്ക് ആശംസ അർപ്പിക്കുന്നതിനായി എത്തിച്ചേർന്നിരിക്കുന്ന PVC സർ ഡോക്ടർ വിജയൻ സാറിനെയും സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളുന്നു. ഈ പരിപാടിയിൽ മുഖ്യ സംഭാഷണം നടത്തുന്നതിനായി എത്തിച്ചേർന്നിരിക്കുന്ന ഡോക്ടർ നരേന്ദ്രനാഥൻ സാറിനെയും സസന്തോഷം സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളുന്നു. കൂടാതെ സ്റ്റാറ്റ്യൂട്ടറി ഓഫീസർമാരായ രജിസ്ട്രാർ മനോജ് സർ, ഡീൻ റിസർച്ച് ഡോക്ടർ ഷാജി സർ, ഡീൻ അക്കാഡമിക് ഡോക്ടർ ഉണ്ണികൃഷ്ണൻ സർ, ഡീൻ സ്റ്റുഡൻസ് അഫയേഴ്സ് ഡോക്ടർ ഇക്ബാൽ സർ, കൺട്രോളർ ഓഫ് എക്സാമിനേഷൻസ് ഡോക്ടർ അനിൽകുമാർ സർ, പങ്കെടുക്കാനെത്തിയിരിക്കുന്ന മറ്റ് വിശിഷ്ട വ്യക്തികളെയും എല്ലാവരെയും ഈ പരിപാടിയിലേക്ക് സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്തുകൊള്ളുന്നു. ഈ പരിപാടി ഉദ്ഘാടനം ചെയ്യുന്നതിനായി കേരള യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി ഓഫ് ഹെൽത്ത് സയൻസസിന്റെ ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട വൈസ് ചാൻസലർ ഡോക്ടർ മോഹൻ സാറിനെ ക്ഷണിച്ചുകൊള്ളുന്നു. സർ പ്ലീസ്.
Thank you, Dr. Subhadra. Most respected invited faculty of today's webinar, my own teacher, Professor Narendranath, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University, Dr. Vijayan, newly joined Dean of Research, Professor Shaji, Professor Krishnan, and esteemed members of this webinar. Good afternoon and a very happy new year to you all. Kerala University of Health Sciences is happy to continue the webinars on healthy aging. As we all know, this is the decade of healthy aging, and we had several programs with a 2-day program at Calicut Baby Memorial Hospital under the leadership of Professor Krishnan, and in fact we wanted to continue to have regional programs all over Kerala, but unfortunately COVID came and everything changed, and now we are in an online mode. But in spite of COVID, we have conducted several programs with experts, and now we have Professor Narendranath, the most eminent gastroenterologist the country has produced, and a great internationally recognized epidemiologist with us. We know that aging is a very big problem for Kerala because 2015 survey said 13% of Keralites are above 60. Now it may be 15%, and there may be about 50 lakhs of Keralites above 60. And that is an advantage or a burden that we have to realize. Then relationship with aging, health, and gut is a very exciting topic of these recent years. Of course, the gut problems of an age is everybody knows. But then now people are saying that if you alter the microbiome of the gut, your aging process can be arrested. You can become young. Of course, these are all very exciting, hot topics, and we have the best person to talk about all these exciting areas. So I once again welcome our own faculty, my own teacher, Professor Narendranath, to give his valuable thoughts on this wonderful topic. Thank you.
താങ്ക് യു മോഹൻ സാർ. മോഹൻ സാറിന്റെ ഒരു ആശയമായിരുന്നു ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു പരമ്പര നടത്തുക എന്നത്. അടുത്തതായി ബാക്കിയുള്ളവരൊന്ന് മ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്താൽ കൊള്ളായിരുന്നു കേട്ടോ. അടുത്തതായി പരിപാടിക്ക് ആശംസ അർപ്പിക്കുന്നതിനായി ബഹുമാനപ്പെട്ട പ്രോ വൈസ് ചാൻസലർ ഡോക്ടർ വിജയൻ സാറിനെ ക്ഷണിച്ചുകൊള്ളുന്നു. വിജയൻ സാർ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നതാണ്. അപ്പോ
ഡോക്ടർ വിജയൻ, you are muted.
Sorry. Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kerala University of Health Sciences, Professor Mohanan Kundummal, Speaker of today's speaker, the senior-most, one of the senior-most gastroenterologists of the world, and also a world-famous epidemiologist, Professor Narendranathan sir, Professor Sara Varghese madam, Registrar Dr. Manoj Kumar, Dr. Anil Kumar's Control of Examinations, Dr. Shaji, Dr. Unnikrishnan, Dr. Iqbal, Professor Krishnan, and yes, respected faculty who are attending this meeting, and also the students and other learners. As mentioned by our Honorable VC, yes, we are having a series of lectures on aging process, and as mentioned by him, nearly 15% of our guts are aged guts, so having a lot of problems, and we were focusing on each and every organ wise we are approaching to study what are the changes that is happening due to aging, and how we can, it is not actually preventing it, actually bringing it to resilience. So today is an important session regarding gut. So probably wonders can be done by manipulating the gut. So let us hear from none other than Professor Narendranath sir, and I am extending best wishes for this program. Thank you very much.
നന്ദി സാർ. അടുത്തതായി മുഖ്യ സംഭാഷണത്തിനായി എത്തിച്ചേർന്നിരിക്കുന്ന ഡോക്ടർ നരേന്ദ്രനാഥൻ സാർ. അദ്ദേഹം വി സി മോഹൻ സാർ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെയും വിജയൻ സാർ പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെയും കേരളത്തിൽ എല്ലാവർക്കും പരിചിതനായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഗാസ്ട്രോഎൻട്രോളജിസ്റ്റ് ആണ്. ഇപ്പോ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തുള്ള GG ഹോസ്പിറ്റൽ ആൻഡ് കോസ്മോപൊളിറ്റൻ ഹോസ്പിറ്റൽ അവിടെ സീനിയർ കൺസൾട്ടന്റ് ഇൻ ഗാസ്ട്രോഎൻട്രോളജി ആണ്. കൂടാതെ ഇന്ത്യൻ കൗൺസിൽ ഓഫ് മെഡിക്കൽ റിസർച്ച് ന്യൂഡൽഹി അവിടുത്തെ പ്രോജക്ട് റിവ്യൂ കമ്മിറ്റി, ഗാസ്ട്രോഎൻട്രോളജിയുടെ പ്രോജക്ട് റിവ്യൂ കമ്മിറ്റി ചെയർപേഴ്സൺ ആണ്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ RCC തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തെ ഹ്യൂമൻ എത്തിക്സ് കമ്മിറ്റിയുടെയും ചെയർപേഴ്സൺ ആണ്. അദ്ദേഹം തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തെ ഗവൺമെന്റ് മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജിന്റെ ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ് ഓഫ് ഗാസ്ട്രോഎൻട്രോളജിയുടെ പ്രൊഫസറും HODയും ആയിരുന്നു. അതുപോലെ ക്ലിനിക്കൽ എപ്പിഡമിയോളജി റിസോഴ്സ് ആൻഡ് ട്രെയിനിങ് സെന്റർ മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജിലെ തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തുള്ള മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജിലെ ഡയറക്ടറുമായിരുന്നു. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ അദ്ദേഹം ഇന്ത്യൻ ക്ലിനിക്കൽ എപ്പിഡമിയോളജിക്കൽ നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് ഇന്ത്യ ക്ലൈൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സംഘടനയുടെ പ്രസിഡന്റും ഇൻക്ലൈനിന്റെ ബോർഡ് ഓഫ് ഡയറക്ടേഴ്സ് മെമ്പറുമായിരുന്നു. അനവധി അവാർഡുകൾ നേടിയിട്ടുള്ള അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ പാരിതോഷികങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ കുറച്ചധികം നേരം വേണമെങ്കിലും 2-3 ചുരുക്കത്തിൽ പറയട്ടെ. അദ്ദേഹം സർജറിയിൽ ഗോൾഡ് മെഡൽ നേടിയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു മാന്യ വ്യക്തിയാണ്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ കോമൺവെൽത്ത് ഫെലോഷിപ്പ് ഫോർ ട്രെയിനിങ് ഇൻ ഗാസ്ട്രോഎൻട്രോളജി, ഫ്രീമാൻ ഹോസ്പിറ്റൽ, ന്യൂകാസിൽ അപ്പോൺ ടിനി, UK-യിലെ 1982-83-ല്. അതുപോലെ റോക്ക് ഫെലോഷിപ്പ് ഫോർ ട്രെയിനിങ് ഇൻ ക്ലിനിക്കൽ എപ്പിഡെമിയോളജി, യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി ഓഫ് നോർത്ത് കരോളിന. അവിടുത്തെയും ഫെലോഷിപ്പുകൾ നേടിയിട്ടുള്ള ആളാണ്. ഇതുകൂടാതെ വളരെ മോഹൻ സാർ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ വളരെ വലിയൊരു റിസർച്ചർ ആണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ഏരിയ ഓഫ് ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റ് ഹെപ്പറ്റൈറ്റിസ് ബി, പെപ്റ്റിക് അൾസർ, പാൻക്രിയാറ്റൈറ്റിസ്, ഹ്യൂമൻ ഡെവലപ്മെന്റ് ഇൻഡെക്സ് ആണ്. വളരെയധികം ഇൻഡെക്സ്ഡ് ജേർണൽസിൽ പബ്ലിക്കേഷൻസ് ഉള്ള ഒരു സാറുമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം. അദ്ദേഹത്തെ ഈ വേദിയിലേക്ക് ക്ഷണിക്കുന്ന വളരെ അഭിമാനപൂർവമാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ഈ ചെറിയ നേരം കൊണ്ട് കിട്ടാവുന്ന മുത്തുമണികൾ എല്ലാവരും ശേഖരിക്കുവാൻ കഴിയട്ടെ എന്ന് ആശംസിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ സാറിനെ ക്ഷണിക്കുകയാണ്. സർ, പ്ലീസ്.
Thank you, Dr. Subhadra. Respected Vice Chancellor, Pro Vice Chancellor, and my beloved teacher, Dr. Sarah Varghese. I see some of my classmates, Dr. Joy Philip and Dr. Krishnan are there. And it's an honor and a privilege to address this august audience on a topic that is dear to me. And also, let's go to the topic without much introduction. Can I share the screen now?
Yes, sir.
I hope it's clear. It's visible.
Yeah.
Yeah, aging and the gut. It has been said that aging is the progressive decline in the physiologic process and increased susceptibility to disease. Some people have described aging as an arch. You are born, and then you improve your strength, your function improves, your intelligence improves, and you reach a peak at about middle age, and then gradually it comes down and down. That's how, pardon? That's how aging has been described. And I think we all know possibly the theories of aging. One is what is called the program theory, where our genes are all programmed so that this person will live for such a period of time. And these genes are involved in repair and also in regenerations. And it's at a particular time that this wane off, and that leads to aging. The second is what is called the damage or the error theory, where like any other car or something, as it becomes old, it develops some problems in the machines, and then its performance comes down. And this is the damage or the error theory. There are many other theories in aging, but I think while coming to the gut, we know that unlike other organs like the skin, the bone, the muscles, our eyesight, our hearing, and our brain, the gut is not that much affected. Age-related physiological changes in the GI tract are very minimal, and by themselves are not impediments to daily living. This is an important message. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is not to go and give a great review of everything that happens in gut. For those of you who are interested, I'll direct you to a very good book written by Dr. Dharmarajan, who was 1 year senior to me, and Dr. Pichmani, who was one of the seniors in Trivandrum Medical College, a book on geriatric gastroenterology. It contains about 660 pages, and it's very good reading, written in a simple language, and all complicated issues are covered there. I'd like to invite your attention to that, please. And if you come to the symptoms of gastroenterology, if you take a person above the age of 65, you'll find that about 24% of these people have abdominal pain, similar number complain of constipation, about 14% complains of diarrhea, the other persons, 11 complain of irritable bowel syndrome-like symptoms, and 4 fecal incontinence. But of all these people, how many consult a doctor? You'll see that only about 1/4 of these persons with the symptoms consult a doctor, less than 1/4 of the symptoms. If you go to the emergency department, you'll find that about 30% of the ER visits, emergency room visits, are by persons above the age of 60. And among the persons who come to the hospital in an emergency room, 60% are hospitalized. And out of these 60%, you know that 20% undergo surgery, and 5% of the people who are admitted die. The last three, the 60% hospitalization, 20 surgery, and 5% death are Western statistics, but the visits are actually statistics from 30% ER visits are from Kerala statistics. But one of the things about the elderly reporting disease is that there is a decreased awareness of the disease. And they think that, oh, it's okay, my slight abdominal pain, this happens in old age, it will go off. And they have small bleeding per rectum. They think that it's because the stool was hard, and then they attribute everything to old age. And then economic reasons, that is one of the major issues. You have abdominal pain, you have to go there, you have to pay for the tests, and things. So many of these people delay coming to the hospital because of economic reasons. And another thing is that at this age, people think, what can be done? So they refuse to go to the hospital. And then another important thing which comes in our social life is that we don't want to trouble our children who have their own families, they have their own things to take care of. And you don't want to tell them that now that I've got an abdominal pain and it's very severe, why don't you take me to the hospital? So one of the things that elderly people do is they are hesitant to trouble others, and that's why they also report things much less than the others. Another thing which colors the picture of elderly in the hospital is that about 40% of these people have diabetes. About more than 1/3 have hypertension, pulmonary, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, about 1/3 of depression. Dementia occurs in about 20% of the people above 80. Hearing comes down in about 25% of the people. And another important thing is medications. Medication is one of the most important things that colored our picture, the picture of elderly presenting to the hospital. If you look at the drug use by elderly in India, there are two very good articles in the Indian Academy of Geriatrics and Indian Journal of Physiology Pharmacy. You find that an average, an adult above the age of 6 takes about 6 medicines per person. And about 42% of these people take 1 to 5 medicines. And 6 to 10 medicines are taken by about 47%. And more than 15 medicines, 0.5% of the adults take more than 15 medicines. And Ayurvedic medicine is taken by 64.8%, according to this study. And homeopathy medicines are taken by about 62.4% of these people. So going to this, I'd like to give a quote by William Osler, who said that no drug has a single effect, and these secondary actions range from mildly inconvenienced to frankly dangerous. So I think these are one of the things that we have to know. These drugs are double-edged weapons. The adverse events in the gastrointestinal tract is very variable. It can have atypical presentation. It can range from mild nausea to even bleeding and perforation of the viscus. Some are transient, and once you discontinue the medicine, some go off. But there are other side effects which may be worse than the illness itself. That is one of the most important things. The side effects may be worse than the illness itself. This is one of the things, the side effects of one of the medicines, the prokinetic drugs that we take. This is the dyskinesia, because this levosulfide, metoclopramide, and all can produce these symptoms.
In the second segment.
So in the gastrointestinal tract, the things that it can induce, one is called the pill esophagitis. You know that because of the dry saliva, reduced in saliva, and many people are not able to swallow the pills very well, and some of these pills may get stuck in the esophagus. It may rupture there, and the classical example is doxycycline. Even young people complain of severe chest pain after taking doxycycline. They may find that they may have ulcers. So if they're taking drugs like doxycycline, aspirin, and potassiums and things like that, it's always advisable that they bring a good quantity of water along with it. And then this is what is called a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, gastropathy. You look at this is the endoscopic view of the stomach, and you find what is called the salt and pepper appearance. The dark colors are because of the bleeding, and these drugs can produce bleeding. And this is what is called the diaphragm disease. This is classically seen with taking diclofenac and such non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. This occurs in the cecum and the ascending colon. If you see that thing, the ascending colon is covered by a membrane-like thing, like a diaphragm, and then there is an opening there. And this is a diaphragm disease, which is supposed to be due to NSAIDs. and then the pseudomembranous colitis, which occurs either due to proton pump inhibitors or antibiotics. So another interesting thing that you should all know about is what is called the prescription cascade. Let me give an example. This person who has got gastroesophageal reflux disease, he complains of acid irritations, he goes to the doctor. And the doctor prescribes him pantoprazole, which reduces the acid, and a prokinetic drug called levosulpride. And the levosulpride is something which can induce extrapyramidal symptoms, as I told you. So this person develops tremors, and then again he goes and consults a neurologist. And the neurologist is worried, he has got Parkinson's, so what do I do? So the side effect is diagnosed as a new medical condition. The offending drug goes unnoticed. He undergoes tests, CT scan and whatnot, and then he prescribes another medicine, and this person goes home with a new drug. And this is what we call as a prescription cascade. And the anticholinergic that is prescribed for Parkinsonism may lead him to develop urinary retention. He may go to another doctor, and this goes on forever. And so this is one of the things which elderly face, is the prescription cascade, with one prescription leading to one side effect going unnoticed, and then this going to another medication, and so on and so forth. So let us give an example. I told you about the prokinetics like domperidone, metoclopramide and all. One of the things is that you should not exceed the recommended dosage. If you look at the things that are available, this is a prescription where it contains 20 milligrams of rabiprazole and 30 milligrams of domperidone. And the maximum dose in a day of domperidone suggested by the British National Pharmacopoeia, 30 milligrams. But you find that people give twice daily. So the dose increases. So 75 milligrams is the dose of levosulpride. It goes to 150 milligrams. Then it goes on and on like that. So this is something that you should understand. Let us say that a person comes with vomiting. He is given a prokinetic. And then he's got abdominal pain. He is given an antispasmodic. It's surprising that many qualified doctors and consultants and specialists combine prokinetic domperidone with an antispasmodic like dicyclomine and things like that. They have got opposite action. They are not supposed to be given together. This is a very common mistake that we see in prescription, possibly because that we are too busy in our daily things, and then we don't look deeper into the side effects of these drugs. And then I told you about the extrapyramidal symptoms by levosulpride. And then domperidone, is something that can affect the QT interval. And then you should be careful giving other drugs which can affect the QT interval like chloroquine, erythromycin, and so on and so forth. Now the proton pump inhibitors, that these are one of the most widely misused drugs. It has been found that above the age of 65, there is a 3 to 4% chance of you getting a PPI than your person who is younger than you. And more than 50% of the prescriptions of proton pump inhibitors are guideline non-compliant. They are not according to the guideline. They are not necessary. And another interesting thing is that an elderly goes to a cardiologist and is diagnosed as having ischemic heart disease and is given clopidogrel. And then he develops abdominal symptom. He goes to a doctor and he gives him omeprazole. We know that clopidogrel, when given along with omeprazole, the action of clopidogrel comes down. There are reports and reports of people developing the effectiveness of clopidogrel coming down when omeprazole is given along with it. So this is something that should be done. And then when you stop proton pump inhibitors, there is a thing called acid rebound. If a person has been taking proton pump inhibitors for a long time and then suddenly stop it, they develop rebound. So it has been found that about 60 to 70% of the person who are on proton pump inhibitors continue to go on taking these things. And because of its suppression, it produces megaloblastic anemia, calcium and magnesium deficiency. And another important thing which you have said is about Clostridium difficile infection, which can occur, and interstitial nephritis. So these are about the side effects of proton pump inhibitors, and more common in the elderly, these side effects. And then what is potentially inappropriate medication? This is something which I would want all of you to listen to. Inappropriate drug prescribing is defined as the use of medication whose risks outweigh their benefits. One common approach to examining this issue is what is called as the drugs to avoid criteria. And these criteria were developed by this person called Mark H. Beers. And I strongly suggest that if the gerontology department has to do something for the old people, you should come out like Beers criteria. You should come out with the Kuhas criteria or something like that, in which you mention which are the drugs to avoid in old age, drugs to avoid in people above the age of 60. I think that this is something that a gerontology department like in Kuhas should look into and develop criteria like the Kuhas criteria or something, so that inappropriate medications are avoided. Then Beers criteria, there is a drug list. I told you about anticholinergics, chlorodiazepam. The list is very long, but the list is incomplete. And you should de-prescribe unnecessary medications. De-prescribe stool softeners, proton pump inhibitors, food supplement, benzodiazepine. These things should be de-prescribed. So this is when a person comes with a lot of drugs, it's your duty to see that how many can be de-prescribed. So in this respect, so one of the first duties of the physician is to educate the masses not to take a lot of medicines. That is by William Osler. So in this comes the comprehensive medical management or medication therapy management. There are persons who are working in medication therapy management, especially in the outside nations. They target the elderly people. They look at their prescription, find that about 15, 20 prescription, and it is the duty of these people. And this medication therapy management is usually managed by a pharmacist, by a senior pharmacist, or by nurses who go there and look at their prescription. And they see, let's say they see omeprazole, clopidogrel interaction. There are softwares are available where it's key in all the drugs and see how many are having interaction. Then they call the doctor and then tell him politely, so do you want it to be continued or not? So I think that these are things which should be available. Medication therapy management is one of the important things which any clinical setting, like I think one of the Kuhas or some such university should have these things. And what these people do is that they communicate with the patient. Patient does not have much understanding of the disease. So it is these people go and talk to them. And the doctor may not know about the cost of the medicine, what thing others are taking, whether these drugs are covered by the insurance and so on and so forth. And these people go to many doctors like the neurologists, gastroenterologists, and so on. So it's the medication therapy management people who can look into it so that they can reduce the cost, then reduce the duplicate prescription, reduce interaction. So in elderly people, medication therapy management is one thing which I think we are lacking in Kerala. And I think which centers like Kuha should come out with medication therapy management. So they go and visit people above the age of 65, look at their prescriptions and see how it can be altered to the benefit, of course, without treading on the wrong side of the people who prescribe them. Okay. Now let's come back to the esophagus, and where you know that the movements is the, and we study the movements of the esophagus by barium meal. Now this is a barium meal X-ray which shows the, you can see the barium going down. You can see the walls of the barium which are actually nicely seen, regular walls. But what happens in old age? You know, in old age you get what is a condition called press B esophagus. Now look at this. I think you can appreciate this. The lower end of the esophagus. Look at the abnormal movements that are there. So this is what we call press B. Meaning press B means old, what occurs in old age. So it's press B esophagus. So these are changes which can occur in old age. Normal barium swallow and press B esophagus. And one of the interesting things is that many of these people may develop dysphagia. But when a person comes to you with dysphagia, don't think of press B esophagus or movement disorders. Always rule out cancer. So, but people who do not have cancer and have dysphagia, it may be better that it's always better that you can, if someone can sit along with the grandparents or the parents who are old, it makes their swallowing and eating much easier. You take soft food and then raw food only as bananas, and you can even give dysmotility drugs when the dysphagia is more. But always remember that organic disease, this is a person with cancer of the esophagus. When a person comes with dysphagia, always rule out malignancy before you making a diagnosis of press B esophagus, dry mouth causing difficulty in swallowing and so on and so forth. Once you have excluded, of course, we can go into the other things. Now going down a little bit into the esophagus is this is the prevalence of severe esophagitis. So you'll find that in the people who are about 60 to 70, you see that esophagitis, 30% severe esophagitis, more than 70, 35% have more than severe esophagitis. So as age increases, the esophagitis symptoms also increase in these people. The lower esophageal sphincter, you'll see, is relaxed and is open. And many times when there is reflux occurs, the acid can go and injure this area. And you know that about 22% of these people can present with heartburn. And as I mentioned earlier, the severity of the heartburn underestimates esophagitis. 25% persons have severe esophageal symptoms like dysphagia, odynophagia, and complications of GRD are more common in the elderly. So this is one thing which I think many of you would have seen this serial, which occurs in The Good Doctor. I will show you a small clipping from this, and I hope you understand. This person is a young boy who has got autism. He has come here, and let us say he's asking his boss.
No, just wanted to get out of my apartment and to work. What do you plan on working up at home? Making sure the rest of the stuff is a job. I understand. What should I tell a patient if they don't think they're sick, but I think they have pancreatic cancer? I think one of our patients has pancreatic cancer. 17. He's burped 17 times in 10 minutes. It's a frequent symptom of pancreatic cancer. He's also jaundiced. Whole skin is definitely not the same color it was 6 months ago. I looked at his mouth when he was telling me about his dog. He just do a CBC, CMP, amylase, lactase, CA19 levels, the CTF, and the pancreatic protocol, and do not he has pancreatic cancer, stage 3.
So what I wanted to tell here was that it can present in very unusual forms, but don't think that every person who belches has pancreatic cancer. But this person has a belching, and he was also jaundiced. But whenever we are talking about elderly, don't think about old age being a cause of symptoms. Always think that there may be an organic disease underneath. So this person had pancreatic cancer. And then there are certain alarm. Whenever a person comes to you with signs and symptoms, always looks for alarm signs. Alarm signs like anemia, severe loss of appetite, bleeding, either hematemesis or melena or fresh blood in the stools, a family history of cancer, dysphagia, difficulty in swallowing, symptoms that occur at night. It is said that our digestive system sleeps at night. And if a person has pain or diarrhea at night, always think that there is something wrong. Fever, vomiting, weight loss. These are all things. Whenever a person comes with symptoms with all these things, always think that there may be something organic about it. I again want to stress that never diagnose old age as a cause of a symptom. So if you look at the cancer mortality, you'll find that the colon, stomach, liver, esophagus, pancreas. And if you look at the mortality, look at the prostatic cancer, the mortality is much low. Look at the mortality due to liver and esophagus and pancreas. These are very high. So I think early diagnosis is one of the things that we should do in diagnose. Always find out whether there are alarm signs and go and catch them. And you know that 59.3% of cancer-related deaths in 2020 in the world occurred in the people who are above the age of 65. So I think there is no justification for us to miss a diagnosis of cancer. Always come out with this. Now, this is peptic ulcer disease. You know that the peptic ulcer previously used to think that it was due to hurry, worry, and curry. But we know that now these are produced by bacteria. And you know that these bacteria have got flagella, and this makes them move around. And these bacteria called the Helicobacter pylori are the reasons for peptic ulcer disease. And this infection in the elderly age group is definitely more than the younger people. And non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, antiplatelets like aspirin, clopidogrel, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like fluoxetine are all things which can lead on to ulcerations. And these ulcers in the elderly are more prone to complications like bleeding and perforation. Now, I think the next important thing is anorexia. It was, I think, Umar Khan who said, food served without love is bitter. And as we grow old, you may lose the people who are supporting you, you may lose your parents, and you may lose your spouses and things like that, and the food may not sound as tasty as it used to be. And then there are many causes of anorexia, like loss of taste, smell, satiation, defective emptying, defective low gastric acid, or things like pathologic conditions like the dental abnormalities, difficulty in swallowing. There are many diseases which can produce loss of appetite, many drugs and alcohol, dementia, all this can lead to. And then you may find it sociologic things like you don't feel like going and shopping. You don't feel like preparing food, good food. And your income, when your income comes down, naturally the quality of the food comes down. And then the interaction, living skills, psychological things like all this can contribute to anorexia in the elderly. But one of the things which I would like to say is that if you divide the expenditures in a family, like the living expenditure, for the expenditure for the drug, and the expenditure for the entertainment, and the expenditure for the food, once your income comes down, the things that comes down is your food. The quality of your food comes down. And then again, it may comes down. So this is the thing which takes the first hit. And this may be one of the reasons why many of these people are malnourished and have got anorexia. And always when a person comes with anorexia, this is cancer stomach. Always roll out cancer stomach. These, the microbes which surround us. And then, the microbes, we come to the understanding, we find that a human body has got 100 trillion microbes. And if you take the number of organisms, the cells in our body, there are only 10 trillion human cells. If democratically, if there is an election, I think these microbes will win our control over our body. And there are only 10 trillion human cells, you understand the thing. And there are more than 10,000 species of microorganisms, and they weigh about 2 kilos. And each person's microbes are different. And then majority of these occur in our gut. And that's why I bring in the changes that occur in the gut. The gut depends on how you are born, whether it was a normal delivery or C-section, how you lactation, how the feeding is started, whether there are pets in your family, and drugs you take, the area where you live. And as you grow old, you find that when you're born, there are more lactobacillus in your intestines. And as you grow old, there are more bifidobacteria, and then the firmicutes come in, bacteroids come in. And as you become older, the good bacteria comes down and the bad bacteria increase in our body. So there are people who have even felt that the human beings and the microbiota, they age hand in hand. People have even thought, is the change in the microbiota the cause or the consequence of aging? Can you reverse aging by changing the microbiome? Can you make a person, can you improve the longevity by changing microbiome? It's a good topic which people are working on. Like targeted therapies like probiotics and prebiotics, can it help in ameliorating aging? And these gut bacteria are definitely important in these things. But one of the things that is important is what is called inflammaging. The bacteria which are there are responsible for the slow aging and slow inflammation that takes place in the body, which also occurs due to the inflammation that is going on is called as inflammaging. And inflammaging is contributed to a great extent by our gut bacteria. And Parkinson's disease is supposed to be a result of inflammaging. And then there are many neurological diseases which are attributed to our gut microbes, like the Parkinsonism in the elderly and Alzheimer's disease have all been attributed to the gut microbiome and the changes in the microbiota. So can prebiotics and probiotics change the thing? Or what about fecal microbial transplant? Can fecal transplant change the thing? So let's now go to a few words about fecal transplant. This is what we call as poo as medicine. Fecal microbiota transplant is the introduction of fecal suspension from a pre-screened healthy donor into the gastrointestinal tract of a patient. And this normalizes the composition and functionality of the gut microbiota of the recipient. This could only be performed by health care practitioners experienced in giving FMT. Don't try it at home. No? That some people may the do-it-yourself things are available in the net. Don't try it at your home. So this is how your fecal suspension is made. You may give it either through the colonoscopy or through an endoscopy or through a tube that is put. FDA has allowed this as can be given as treatment. You can give it as a tube through colonoscopy or through enemas. The fecal suspensions are given or as capsules. In gastrointestinal tract, especially in the elderly, the recurrent Clostridium difficile colitis, which occurs, is more common in the elderly because of the use of the proton pump inhibitors or antibiotic. This is one of the cases where you can use fecal transplantation, chronic constipation, halitosis, Parkinson's disease, or the other candidate diseases where this can be tried. This is the picture of a person. This lady had fecal, had Clostridium difficile colitis, and this person, the husband, gave the fecal matter to be transplanted to this lady, and she became all right. These two are his children. So, elderly, you have some hope that you can have fecal microbial transplant to give you. So it has been attributed that the COVID is more severe in the elderly, and this has been attributed to the changes that occur in the gut microbes. I'm not going to the details of this. Now, constipation, very important. The prevalence, more than about 1/3 of these people have constipation, and it's more in the female than in men. It is more in people who are living in nursing homes. This leads to impaired quality of life. Person feels lethargic and tired. You can describe terrible, awful, and horrible. It has a negative impact on mood, and it reduces your social activity, increases your healthcare costs. I'll show you a small clip where how it affects the relationship with his family, with his society, and things like that are shown very well. You can't get a better description of constipation, how it affects the daily life of a person better than this Amitabh Bachchan, as is shown in this movie Piku. If you have not seen it, I strongly suggest that go and watch this movie. So I think this suggests how it affects your relation with your family members, with your neighbors, and so on. And then you go around, he goes around with a chair commode, and they always locate commode, the toilet, whenever they go, wherever they go. But always remember, a person with constipation of short duration, any of the alarm signs, this is carcinoma colon, and never forget carcinoma colon as the things. And better food, know what a healthy food looks like. Look for important nutrients, read the labels, stay hydrated, stretch your budget, and your exercise, 150 minutes per week. How to increase your life expectancy? And there are 4 tips which have been given. Never smoke. Keep your BMI below 30. Increase intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains with low meat, and 3.5 hours of physical activity per week. This is supposed to keep us, we can increase our life expectancy. What I would like to show here is that another very tragic video, and I want to show the relationship between a family and a person. And many a time you find that the relatives misunderstand the patients with the. This is an old lady. with Parkinson's disease. She's lying there. And this picture was shot by her son. And this, so this maid who is here is paid about 20,000 rupees a month. And this son has shot this video, and see how the daughter and the son-in-law react to her thing. They think that this Parkinsonism, there is a concept called kinesia paradoxa. People cannot move. Now, these people who are not medical doctors cannot understand this. See the reactions.
ഇങ്ങനെ നിൽക്കാൻ ആച്ചിക്ക് പറ്റുവേ വീടാതെ ആന്റി ആ താഴോട്ടങ്ങ് ഇറക്കി
So I think this is one of the attitudes of these people, because they're not actually, because they cannot understand the situation. Now, even one person is asking, are you going for a skiing? No, that's a very tragic thing that you ask a person. Now, I will show you what is kinesia paradoxa, which occurs in persons who are like Parkinsonism. Now, they can move. Sometimes they can't move very far. No? They move with very, very slow steps. But no, when elderly people do not want to go to the bathroom, people think that these people are lazy. And no, when they can walk fast, why do they move like this?
It's a tremendous effort from which to work.
And see the thing that, so people who are looking, suddenly they can even walk fast.
As soon as I approach them to a certain distance, I can stand up.
So then
To my face now.
then they walk faster, and this movement, what is called as kinesia paradoxa. And I think only doctors can understand why people behave like certain things at times and certain other things at other things.
My sheets of papers, and I feel completely relaxed. My brain works better, my hands feel are nimble, and I know I can work.
So they walk. So this is what is called kinesia paradoxa, and many people who are non-medical cannot understand this. So what I would like to see is that empathy, and sometimes we are apathetic. We don't bother what happens to the. There's something called the bystander effect. You know, the bystander effect is something where if there's an accident in the road, if there is only one person, a person may go and help, but there are many others. People may not. No one will go and help those people, and this may happen in the relationships as well. And there is something called compassion fatigue. You come home, you take care of a. I know one of my classmates who has got a spouse who is having Alzheimer's disease. Every time he comes home and takes care of her, day in and day out. And I wonder why these people don't go into compassion fatigue. You know, there's something that people develop, and we have to know the thing. And this is what I call as kindred apathy, which I showed earlier. They cannot understand the old person. And I think it is like our people, like the medical people, who have to intervene, and you have to teach them that this is not their non-cooperativeness. It is because that they are having the disease. So it is one of the points in intervention is to tell these people, no, avoid the ambiguity of these people about the disease should be removed, and then there should be a role reversal. A parent who took care of you in the young, it is your duty to take care of him when they old. This is what we call as role reversing. I have felt that many times that it is the medical people who take care of their elderly better. It has been said that the best drug for an elderly is love. Sometimes you may ask, turn around, ask, if it doesn't work, what do you do? The answer is just increase the dose. Thank you. Thank you.
Subhadra,
Yes, sir.
his talk is over, so please proceed further.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Narendranath, sir. For നേരം വളരെ ഭംഗിയായി കുറച്ചു നേരം കൊണ്ട് വളരെയധികം കാര്യങ്ങൾ പറഞ്ഞു തന്ന സാറിന് നന്ദി. ആർക്കെങ്കിലും ഇനി സംശയങ്ങൾ ചോദിക്കാനുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ചാറ്റ് ബോക്സിൽ ഇട്ട് ചോദിക്കുകയോ അൺമ്യൂട്ട് ചെയ്ത് ചോദിക്കുകയോ ചെയ്യാം.
Narendran, could I ask a question? Very well done, as usual, as expected. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you well.
Constipation is a very, very common problem among
Yeah.
the elderly, and we always say take a lot of roughage.
Yeah.
But then there is another point: if you take a lot of water,
Yeah.
you will have loose stools, or maybe the consistency might improve. And we
Yeah.
always, as medical people, tell them if you drink a lot of water, you'll end up passing a lot of water in the urine, but not increase, or increase the consistency to liquid levels.
Yeah.
Could you take time off to explain or clarify that point, please?
I think constipation is it's a very common issue, and I think this is something that we always face in these people. And I think many people who come to me take the Ayurvedic drug called Kayam or something like that. And surprisingly, the side effects of the Ayurvedic drugs for constipation, I have not felt the same side effects as I've seen with the other drugs. So I just don't dissuade them from taking those things. So many a time we find that when the intake is less, and then when they find very difficult to take the bulk, I think I individualize, depend on the person's concern, and depending upon the people, we may find that in some persons the bulk will work, in some others it doesn't work. And then, as you rightly said, too much of water is not going to help them as well. So I think I individualize it, and that the prokinetic drug, which are available like Prucalopride, it does work in these people. One of the things that you have to be careful is that depression is very common in the elderly, and Prucalopride is one thing which can also induce depression, and suicidal thoughts have been described in people taking on Prucalopride. So I think that in people who can tolerate roughage and Prucalopride, I give it, and some people do find it very useful.
Why I pointed it out is that people who are constipated can present to the doctor confused, irritable, aggressive, and oftentimes they themselves know how to ease the bowels out, and then they become normal later on. That's where, as part of the syndromic presentations of constipation, we should be aware of it.
Yeah, that's why I showed that picture of that Amitabh Bachchan movie.
Yes, that's right.
It shows all the aspects of constipation, which is so beautifully depicted. I used to think that possibly he also has constipation, otherwise he could not depict it so well. So well. Any other things or?
My question is, what is the role of turmeric and the gut microbiome?
Turmeric
and gut microbiome.
Turmeric and microbiome.
Turmeric and gut microbiota.
What is the role?
I have not heard any. I know the turmeric is an antioxidant, but I have not heard any relationship between them. Turmeric and microbiota, I may not be able to tell you so much about it, because any others who have got any comment about that? That's all. Krishnan, Dr. Krishnan, do you have any comments on that?
No, the only one occasion where I use probiotics, I have no experience with curcumin, certainly not. Only thing is, many a time somebody comes to casualty, young or old, invariably there's a concoction of antibiotics, Rifagat, that, this, etc. If you just keep them off milk, lactose intolerance being often a problem with, after a temporary lactose intolerance after a viral or bacterial disease, give them a probiotic, keep them off milk, replace fluids, and they invariably get better without any of the antibiotics that's often prescribed. That's the only comment I have to make about probiotics.
Dr. Sara Varghese, do you have any comments, because you are a person who was well read in these aspects and all? Any comments about?
Yes, because I have been into this because my granddaughter is gluten sensitive. So I've read a little bit about it, and so the both the allopathy doctor and the Ayurvedic doctor have put her on a strict diet, but also some of them have advised this turmeric, and it is supposed to be anti-inflammatory, antioxidant effect. And is there any harm in taking it?
Turmeric. I don't think
I don't think there can be any harm, because after all, it's one of the traditional medicines in our own system. So I don't think it'll certainly do any harm. In fact, it might do some good. And one of the things old grannies would suggest is giving kachi moria in the context of diarrhea. I'm sure it'll do some good, a lot of good, in fact.
Sir, in old age, we advise patients to take a lot of proteins. The best protein easily available is nuts. In one of your slides, it was shown that nuts are not advisable. Can you explain, sir?
No, that is dysphagia. Dysphagia. That is when a person has got dry this thing coming out, then don't give nuts. I think when a person has got following, that can produce them. Otherwise, nuts are not. That was for a slide on dysphagia, not otherwise.
So there is a question. Recently, many patients complain of bloating towards evening and much rumbling. No abnormality seen in scan or blood reports. Even pylori test is negative. If they are fasting, no complaint at all. What further investigations to be done?
No, I think this is there are mainly two things which contribute to this. One is motility. One is what is called gastroparesis. A variant of gastroparesis or motility, intestinal motility. And second is these symptoms can occur due to what is called the bacterial overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth syndromes. So, and third is about the diet. There are certain types of diets. For example, as Dr. Krishnan told you about milk, and then wheat. Surprisingly, even though we all take wheat, there is a certain amount of wheat intolerance in our population. So you see whether it is due to any particular type of diet. If it is not due to any particular type of diet, what we do is that we give them a prokinetics to improve their movements and change their bacterial flora, and then try those things. I don't think that we can do for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. There are blood tests are available, or you can do a glucose breath tests are available where you can find out whether there are bacterial overgrowth is there. So this is the way I go and manage these people.
Could I add to that, Narendran? Well, we were in the US some time back, and all the Chinese and the East Asian population have lactose intolerance in a big way. And this is not well recognized among us in India. I myself have lactose intolerance, so I know the difficulties of it. And the moment I gave up lactose, things got better. And surprisingly, even bananas contain lactose, which I realized when I was taking a class on malabsorption a few years ago. So lactose is just a chemical which is found in milk and in a lot of other items of food, which I think we do not recognize easily. And if we give up lactose, things get a lot better from the abdominal point of view.
I think that when I was in Delhi, I was called as the Kala Patala Madrasi. The moment I stopped milk, my the appearance changed. So the Kala Patala became more put on more fat. And we did a study on different people in India and did the lactose intolerance, and we found that the maximum lactose intolerance is in Kerala, and the least in India is in Punjab. Those people can tolerate milk very well. But we in Kerala are the people who are least tolerant for lactose. And always any GI symptoms, or like you diagnose irritable bowel syndrome, gas or anything, a trial you stop milk and see. And one of the things people come and ask, should I stop curd? No, you know that curd, even though curd is fermented one, it does contain certain amount of lactose. If it completely goes of lactose, people won't take it. It becomes so soft. So the buttermilk may be free of lactose, but not curd is not completely free of lactose as such. So lactose intolerance for GI discomfort is a thing. And we have seen people go to medical college, a first year student, and he's becoming weak. The mother asks him take milk, and he takes milk and he doesn't put on weight. Then the mother asks him take it twice daily, morning and evening milk. And this fellow goes on, and this is a common thing which we see in colleges, like lactose intolerance in Kerala. It's, I think, something that we should all know about.
Sir, in one of your slides showed.
Yeah, carry on. What is that?
Normally, in old age, we prescribe nuts to patients who complain of weakness. In one of your slide, it is mentioned not to prescribe or not to take nuts. Why is what's the
explanation? Dysphagia, it is, I think. Dysphagia is the thing that we don't, we say that no, don't take nuts. It's for dysphagia, yeah.
See.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Sarah, madam, you're unmuted. You're muted. You can unmute, yeah. Madam, okay. No, you're again unmuted. You can unmute yourself. You can even press the space bar. Yeah. Okay. You can press the space bars. It may work. Doesn't work. You can unmute the thing, madam. Yeah.
Now we can hear.
Yes, madam. Okay.
Yeah. No, just like lactose intolerance, is there an increased evidence of gluten sensitivity, all wheat and wheat products? Because abroad you have a lot of children with that. Is the same thing happening in Kerala also?
Yeah, I think we do see the thing, but not as much as we thought it would be. It does occur, but not very, very common as such. No, I remember before, in about 1980s, then we were told that celiac disease does not occur in India. And remember 1982, I went to England, and the first person with celiac disease was a Sardarji who came there. So we were not picking up celiac disease at that time. Now with the new tests available, we are picking more and more of celiac disease. We are picking up more, but not it is not such a big thing as I expected it to be. Possibly it may be coming up later on. Dr. Joy Philip is there, or Dr. Joy, any comments or anything?
What about gallbladder disease?
Yeah, gallbladder. I think gallstones are very high in people above the age of 65. So whenever a person comes with abdominal pain, you find a gallstone. Don't think that the gallstones are the cause for the abdominal pain, because the incidence of gallbladder stones is very high, and in some population it is as high as 30 to 35%. So that is something that we should know about.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think some advice on non-pharmacological interventions, like not spending too much time in the bathroom trying to pass motion when you are constipated, and then raising the foot level a bit more, and then try to have one single evacuation rather than many attempts at forceful evacuation. And these are things, sir, I think in Kerala, and I think among middle class, it is sleep as well as bowel and bladder function which has a very adverse impact on quality of life of the older person. So I think as you rightly said, non-pharmacological interventions in terms of a better lifestyle which promotes good bowel movement may be something which we must make the public generally more aware. Is that correct?
Not in Kerala, but the whole world, I think. People say, no, I told you, they describe it as horrible. Say there, if a person, many people say that if they don't have a good motion the day, the whole day is lost. That's what many people, it is not just a matter with Kerala, it is throughout the world. People are so much, especially people above the age of 65 are too much bothered about their bowel. Possibly they don't have much other thing to be worried about. Maybe the reason. Yeah, carry on, madam. It is getting muted, madam. This is getting muted off. Can you, from the center, can someone help unmuting the thing?
Yeah. Okay. No, I just wanted to ask because see, as a not above 65, I'm going to be 86, and both the bowels and the urinary problems are a major factor for the quality of life. So, are there any specific exercises, as you said, non-pharmacological interventions which can help the old age for these two problems, both urine and fecal incontinence?
Well, urine, I'm not no fecal. I think that there are, as been said about the posture and things like that, and but the impact, whether they really help, is something that one should possibly the ineffectiveness of these is possibly because of the they are not doing it the proper way. Possibly, I think that if someone who knows about it goes and tells them about it, they may be able to do it better. That's what I think.
Sir, I think we will, Center for Gerontological Studies, Subhadra and me, can take up the responsibility of looking at the available evidence which can be practiced at a population level to improve bowel movements, something non-pharmacological, as Madam said.
Correct.
Something we will do in a month's time.
Yeah, I think this medication therapy management, I think, is something that we need. I think we want a criteria list of drugs. The Beers criteria list does not contain many drugs which are available in India, and it should contain. So I think that one responsible body should come out with this medication therapy management. And second is to have a list of drugs which we should avoid in the elderly. And I think this is something that I think the KUHAS may be one of the things which can, with the help of the epidemiology center, they may be able to bring out this list of drugs which can be avoided in the elderly. And for medication therapy management, we can make use of the very good postgraduate nurse and the postgraduate pharmacy persons and set up a medication therapy management. And these people should be diplomatic also, not just tell a doctor that this is that and things like that. And another aspect is that I don't know, because we have studied medicine, we don't know whether different medicines do not, in Ayurveda, whether two medicines, medicine may have opposite action. Similarly, homeo may also have different actions maybe there. It may be worthwhile for people interested in those things to look into which are the drugs that should not be co-prescribed. Whereas in medicine, I don't know whether these things are there in homeo and Ayurveda, but I think that of course it may be there. And I think this is something which KUHAS can look into and come out with a problem.
Yes, sure, sir. Sir had mentioned about that drugs to avoid criteria by the KUHAS.
Yeah.
It will be taken under the guidance of Dr. Shaji, who is the Dean Research here.
Yeah. You will be making you can come like Beers criteria. The whole world is talking about Beers criteria in the elderly. Why don't you come with KUHAS criteria for Indians? Because I think there are many drugs in the Beers list, which are many drugs are not in the Beers list, which we are using. I told you about levosulpride. This is a drug which I won't give it to my worst enemy. But I think this list is not there in the list Beers criteria. But I think we should include many such drugs which should be included in these things. So.
Thank you, sir, for this suggestion, and definitely we will take it forward.
Thank you. Any comments from you, sir? Any comments from you? From our VC, any comments?
Yeah. That's what I said, sir. We'll definitely take it forward, and because we have a gerontology center, and we have plans how to run it, and then it will be taking care of all these issues, and we need your support and help as an advisor, so that
we will be there behind you. Okay.
I think
very early, is it?
There are no more questions in the chat box. I think so. There is one suggestion that Kayakalpa is a good yogic practice which help both. There is one suggestion from the participant. And also Dr. Nandini Kumar has praised your talk.
No.
So I think, and there is one from Mini Madhu who says many yoga poses will help in improving the rectal muscles. What is sir's comment about that?
I think, but I think I have not advised anyone like that, and we have not gone into depth about it, so I don't want to comment about it.
Yeah. Managing the diet of these old age people will be a very difficult one, because very reluctant, and also because of the anorexia, they won't be taking much food, and again the constipation and the mood and all may be adding to this effect. What is the advice for these persons' food?
I think it is not just that alone. You have to go. You have to have money to get that sufficient money. You have to go shopping and get those things. You have to cook. And I think if you don't have a person to shop for you, if you don't have a person to cook for you, if you don't have sufficient money to get all these things are important in the food of an elderly. And I think these are not small things which can brush aside as something which is not so significant. But I think that so all these things should be taken care of in managing the diet of these people. So you can't say you take all these things when a person cannot afford it. So, and elderly, even people who have lived very good lives, they cannot have so many food in their table because they don't want to go and shop for it. And the people who want to go and get it are not so interested in getting things they want. So these are things which are not just physiological or medical, that the social may be there. Joy Philip had some comments. Joy, any comments from you? Joy? Dr. Joy, any? Okay. Any comments?
നമ്മളെ ഹെഡ് എൻഡ് ഓൺ ദി ബെഡ് ഒന്ന് ഇങ്ങനെ പൊക്കി കിടക്കുന്ന കാര്യം അതും കൂടെ ഒന്ന് എംഫസൈസ് ചെയ്ത് പറഞ്ഞേരെ. മാട്രസിന്റെ അടിയിൽ പില്ലോ വെച്ചിട്ട് കെയർഡ് പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട്.
I showed that slide. Yes, gastroesophageal reflux disease. What happens is that when your chest should be above the stomach. So some people advise that you put 2 bricks under the head end of the table, head end of the cot, and lift it up. But what happens is that when you do like that, it is likely that there is pooling of blood in the legs. And when you wake up, sometimes when you wake up at night, we find the persons may have a tendency to fall. So what I advise them is to keep pillows under the mattress so that there is a sloping effect and the chest is above the stomach. So you don't have this effect in which, and throughout the night, you don't get pooling of blood into your legs. So this may be a better method. That's what I was showing. That I was stressing on that thing. I hope I made myself clear. Instead of asking people to elevate the head end of the bed by keeping 2 bricks in the below the head end of the table, what it produces is that it can produce pooling of blood into the legs. So what I do is keep the legs as such, lift the head end by putting pillows under the mattress and not under the, and don't elevate the cot. That's what I used to say.
നല്ല എഫക്റ്റീവ് ആണ്.
Okay.
ഞാൻ ഉപയോഗിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുക, അറിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ മുതലേ ഞാൻ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുക. നല്ല എഫക്റ്റീവ് ആണ്.
Sir, one thing, I think there are very, very common things like gastric reflux disease. If we start addressing such issues, there will be more people who are interested, and then we can actually get into more severe, undetected, hidden problems among older people, because then you can start a dialogue by addressing common problems with which we can make a change in the outcome. So that is something which we'll take up very seriously, sir, in the university.
One more thing, Shaji, it may be a good idea to have interaction between the cardiologists, gastroenterologists, general physicians, and so on. As Narendran said, somebody prescribes clopidogrel or aspirin, straight away there's a pantoprazole added. People prescribe verapamil, there's constipation, and very few patients are told about it or know about it. And I think a little interaction between various specialties would do a world of good.
I fully agree with you, sir. I think SSRI is another increasingly prescribed drug for older people for depression. Specific serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which can actually kill because of GI bleed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Do you believe that a doctor's son will be better taking care of his father than a person who doesn't know about the disease, a non-doctor person? I personally felt that because many of the people do not know about the disease. No, that's why they react in a way which I showed you, because people think that it is adamant or they're arrogant. That's why they are not getting up from the bed and things like that. Whereas only a doctor may, a person who can understand it, know that this is a consequence of disease and not the arrogance of the mother or the father which has produced this. This is something which I think that when a social worker goes and interacts with the family who are taking care of the elder people, they should make them understand the disease. And many a time the response to a disease is misunderstood as arrogance or that you don't want to cooperate and things like that, which that's why I thought that a person who understands the disease may be better at taking care of his parents or grandparents.
So
I don't think there's a short answer for it. People might feel that I don't have the time. I'm a busy doctor. Where is the time for me to wait on you? Why don't you be a little more cooperative? It's the other line that many doctors take, unfortunately.
Anyway, holistic management is necessary here. Anyway. Okay. Thank you, sir. Shaji sir, any other comments to be added
No,
to it?
I think we'll discuss and then plan something in consultation with Professor Narendranath and Dr. Krishnan and all. We'll see what can be done as a next step to take this forward. Thank you.
That would be a very good thing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Narendran, once again.
Okay, I think.
So thank you, sir. We had gone through all the symptoms, the disease exacerbating conditions, the medicinal morbidities, the vicious cycle of symptoms from medicines, various conditions like esophagia, then GERD, then the alarming signs like anemia, anorexia, and other common symptoms. Then the most alarming cancer states, and what are the exercises to be done, and how to increase the life expectancies, and also about empathy. These were the things we have dealt with here. And also about the compassion fatigue, which is a new term mentioned by sir. So I think this was a very wonderful session and an eye-opener for everybody. And also sir had given us a task as KUHAS faculty of giving a MMT, medication therapy management, MTM criteria from the side of KUS, which will be done under the able guidance of VC sir, Mohan sir, and also by our Dean Research, Dr. K. Shaji sir, and also with the help of Narendran sir and also Raman Menon sir. And there are many others who are here who are silent here in the session. and hope all these people will be guiding us in these efforts. So thank you again, sir, for this wonderful session, for taking your time, and also thank you, VC sir, for allowing us to give such a wonderful session, and also PVC sir for being with us and felicitating the session, and also the other faculties like Dean Research, Shaji sir, and the other statutory officers of the KUHAS, and also all the other participants, especially Raman Krishnan sir, who is here and who had made this session very lively. And also we had Dr. Sarah Varghese ma'am, who had made the session more lively. Also, so thank you from Center for Gerontological Studies. Thank you once again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
meeting